Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So today I'm here with a series review and I'm going to be talking about the Runaway series by Devney Perry. So here is a bind up of the entire series. Here is the front cover, it goes to the side, and then it goes to the back as well. This is a bind up of all 5 books in the series. So basically this is like a road trip series with all 6 characters in the series all sharing one car, and so each of them gets their own book and gets the car as well. So the bind up special edition is all the stops that they make along the way. So here is on the postcard so you can see the print as well. Got this one signed from the author. Devney Perry actually sells this on her shop. The premise of this series is one car, one cross-country road trip, 5 stories about 6 runaways finally finding home. So basically Devney Perry was inspired by the Boxcar Children series. When she was growing up, she really enjoyed those books. And it talks about in the author's note how one day she was wondering like what would have happened to those characters if they were adults, like what would their stories have been. And so she was kind of inspired by that series, and that is what this series is based on. So this follows 6 runaways who all end up growing up in California in a junkyard together. And then over the years, they've gone their separate ways and have all ended up somewhere different. There's one in Oregon, Arizona, Montana, California, Boston. There's 2 of them in Boston actually when the story starts. So I loved this series, loved binging it, loved seeing all of the stops along the way and all of the characters getting their HEA and the little stops that they find. So I've been doing these series reviews on my channels. They're mostly for Devney Perry books just because I've been binging her entire backlist. So without further ado, we'll jump into me talking about all 5 books in the series. Then I read Runaway Road. This is the first book in the Runaway series by Devney Perry. Loved the premise of the story. It says one car, one cross-country road trip, 5 stories about 6 runaways finally finding home. On the author's note at the end, it talks about how Devney Perry loved the Boxcar Children series when she was growing up, and how she was looking at those one day on her shelves and was wondering what those children would have been up to as adults. So this is where she got the inspiration for this series. So I love that whole idea of this series. I grew up reading the Boxcar Children series, and then my daughter has read them as well, and so I couldn't wait to read this series and find out what Devney Perry did with the books. So when the heroine is newly divorced, and she's always kind of been on the run. Like, she left home when she was 16. Her parents were more interested in drugs than her, and she ended up living in a junkyard with her friends as a teenager, and she spent 2 years of her life living in the back of this Cadillac. Now she takes said Cadillac and decides to go on a road trip to meet up with some of those friends that she grew up with. She wants to pass on the car to them. And so along the way she's going to try to go from Boston to California, but along the way she ends up getting her car broken down in West Virginia and ends up in a small town there, which is where she meets the hero. So the hero owns the local garage shop. He's the mechanic when her car is brought in. Since it's a small town, they end up running into one another a lot. His house is actually located right next to the motel where she stays. And so they have like dinners together and they meet up to talk about her car, and they just kind of form this relationship naturally together. But the whole time it's a bit of a slow burn because they both know that her time in this town has a time limit, like that she's planning on leaving once the car is fixed. I love this romance. I love the very like low inks, kind of that low key, just chill vibes from it. Hero actually has a son as well. He has a teenage son, which the hero and his ex-wife, they were like high school sweethearts and teen parents, so we kind of get that single parent aspect as well. There's a teeny little bit of suspense in here happening as well, just kind of in the background, which was, you know, kind of low-key as well. I did enjoy this one. I gave it 3.5/4 stars. This also had the setup for the next book in the series, which I'm excited to check that out because somebody else ends up taking over the car from her and continuing on the road trip. So Wild Highway is book 2. This book was actually my least favorite in the series. I gave it 3 stars. This one, the heroine Gemma, she owns like a cosmetics company. She's super wealthy in Boston, and she ends up kind of, you know, not really being happy with her life. So she sells her company, gets millions of dollars, and she decides to take off, kind of find herself, jump in the car and take off from it there. So she goes to West Virginia where her friend London, which was the heroine of book 1, ended up, and she gets the car from her and ends up trying to drive. She decides to take it to California, but along the way she takes a detour to Montana and has a little second chance romance moment instead. Gemma wants to go meet up with their other childhood friend, one of the other runaway children, and she is her friend that she left in Montana, and that is Catherine. So Gemma and Catherine went to Montana when they were like 18 or 19 after leaving California. And one day Gemma just up and left and didn't say goodbye to Catherine, didn't say goodbye to the hero, who she had a little moment with as well. And so she's kind of back to make amends and apologize to them. So Gemma is back after 11 years and she apologizes to Catherine, and they get along really well. Catherine works and is the general manager for a really fancy like resort and ranch that the hero's family owns, and he also works at. The hero is rightfully pissed at her at first because she left everybody behind. She left him, she left her friend, like she never said goodbye. And so he is definitely hurt. This book was less of the road trip, which I was actually really wanting more of. This one, the ending felt a little bit rushed for me. We kind of went from the hero and heroine having issues and like not being together to all of a sudden like, let's wrap it up, and their HEA like super fast. So I wanted a little bit more time for them. Otherwise, it's still a fun time. Just 3 stars for this one, and not my favorite in the series. 3 in the Runaway series is Quarter Miles, and I gave this one 5 stars. This one is a friends to lovers romance with tons of longing and pining. So we follow Catherine from Montana, and she takes over the red Cadillac and drives it to Oregon to meet up with one of their other friends, Aria. So Catherine, or Kat, has lived and worked at that rancho resort in Montana since she was 18, so she's worked there for years, and the family there really took her in as one of them, which she loves, but she's also kind of secretly pining over her friend and roommate, which is the son of the family who owns the ranch. So he's always only looked at her as a friend, and she's kind of always wanted more from him. One day when he ends up bringing a date back to the family dinner, she's like, okay, like, why am I even here? What am I doing with my life? Why am I waiting for this dude? Like, I need to go. So she gets in the red Cadillac and decides to take off and kind of just have her own moment. But right as she's about to jump into the car and take off, the hero comes out and he's like, whoa, where are you going? Like, I'm gonna come with you. So he last minute joins her road trip, which was to get away from him, and they end up having a little road trip from Montana to Oregon together. This one gave me all of that road trip action I wanted to see in the second book. I love that they had been friends for over a decade and they've been roommates for 5 years. Like, they have tons of history between one another, but they also realize on the road trip that they actually don't know a ton about one another. So it was fun seeing all that unfold on the trip. It was fun seeing him finally realize that he has more than just friendly feelings for her. The whole trip in his head, he's like, oh my god, like, I can't really be having feelings for her. Like, can I? Is this real? What's going on? Does she feel it? Like, he decides at one of their rest stops to kiss her to convince himself, like, see, there's no spark here, right? Like, there's nothing here. But of course, once he kisses her, he realizes, like, oh my god, this is not good, because now I want so much more. Just really love this one. All the tension and the angst and the surprises and twists along the way. Like, I didn't see some things coming. I just really had a great time with this. So 5 stars. The next was Forsaken Trail, the 4th book in the Runaway series, and I gave this one also 5 stars. This is a hate to love turned be my fake date to a wedding, turned one night stand, turned surprise pregnancy, turned move in with me while you're pregnant romance. And honestly, I loved every moment of it. There's something about the way that Devney Perry writes surprise pregnancies and like surprise baby tropes that just really work for me. It's actually the one who made me question, like, do I not like this trope, or do I actually like secretly like this trope? The surprise pregnancy thing is in the synopsis of the book, so this is not a spoiler. So in this book, we follow Aria, which we met her in the previous book. She was in Oregon. So now it is her turn for the road trip, and she's going to take the car from Oregon to her twin sister's house in Arizona. She uses the time to see her twin sister and then also her nephew that her sister has, but she also has to see, while she's there, her sister's billionaire boss and best friend that she kind of like lives with. Hero Brody and Aria have never gotten along, so he has to go to the wedding of his ex-fiance who's marrying his younger brother. So Clara convinces him to take Aria as his date, or like fake date, you know, to be kind of his moral support. So to their surprise, they actually have a good time at the wedding. They end up sleeping together and all of that. Things go well. Then after their one night stand, Aria ends up going back to Oregon, and then later on is when she realizes that she's pregnant from that one night stand. I really loved Aria and Brody's energy together. They're kind of like whole hate to love vibes. I really liked how as soon as he finds out she's pregnant, he goes to her and he's like, you need to come and live with me, like come stay with me. I want to be part of my child's life, like not like how my parents were with me. So he asks her to come live with him for a year and move to Arizona because he can't leave. He's trying to take over the family business when he inherits it at his next birthday. I really liked seeing how Aria, who's used to doing things on her own, kind of has to like, you know, rely or be taken care of for once. This one was just a super fun time and 5 stars. Then I read the last book in the series, which is Dotted Lines. This is the 5th and final book in the Runaway series, and I gave this one 4 stars. I had a great time binging this whole series. Like, I read these in like maybe 24 hours, but they're all super short. They're like 250-ish pages, give or take, and so they're just a fun time to binge. So this one follows Clara and her son taking off with the Cadillac from Arizona to California to find their last friend, Carson. Carson is the original owner of the Cadillac from when they all grew up in the junkyard together in California. And this ends up being the second chance romance for Clara and Carson. So this one, the first 50% of the book is told all through flashbacks, which I thought was a little too much for me. But we get to see the times when they're teens and living in the junkyard, their traumatic past, which of course all of the characters in the series have traumatic pasts because of, you know, they grew up in a junkyard like for a reason. But I kind of want to just see more of Carson and Clara in present day, which after all those flashbacks, the last half of the book, we do get to see them in present day. So it's been 12 years since they've seen each other, and they kind of have this just very sweet second chance romance. I really love the epilogue of this. It kind of wrapped up the entire series and jumped 23 years into the future with kind of the whole second generation and what happens to the car after that, which was a lot of fun. This was definitely just a great series to binge, and I had a great time. All right, so that was my series review for the Runaway series by Devney Perry. Let me know in the comments if you've read this series or if you plan to now that you've heard about what it's about. I'd love to chat about it. I'd love to talk about anything Devney Perry. I love her books so much. She actually did this special edition binder Bind Up like a year ago, and I saw it on her shop, but then, you know, I hadn't read the series yet, so I didn't grab it at the time. So then after I finished the series this past month, I decided, you know what, I want a copy, and I want that hardcover copy for my shelves. And it was out of stock in her shop. So I messaged Devney Perry and was like, hey, are you ever gonna like restock those? Is there like a chance I'll ever be able to get myself a copy? And she was like, oh yeah, like I just restocked the shop like 5 minutes ago and they're up there. So I ran and grabbed it so fast, and I'm so glad I have this on my shelves now. It's so beautiful. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.